there. Welcome to Suzanne's Cosmic Cafe, where we are cooking these days with a great new game. We started to talk last week about something that we called Tell Me What You Know. And from now on, unless we think of something outstandingly better, the Cosmic Fuel Pump will be collecting information, which isn't quite the right word. It's not like we're interested in data. It's more like we're interested in a way of being. And it would be ideal, it seems to me, in the world today, if we pooled our wisdom and collected a kind of understanding among each other of what we know about, well, what I call happiness. When I say happiness, I mean feeling good, feeling above the line, feeling energized, feeling positive, feeling like you want to go out and meet the world, as opposed to those grungy feelings where it all feels like too much. I can't imagine a better goal for all of us than to set an intention, set bliss as an intention, set a goal to come from that happy place. Oh, sometimes, of course, we can get knocked off course. But the idea, as far as I can tell, is to lead our lives so that fundamentally the who we are is a really positive person. And it's time now, it seems to me, that we turn to one another. We've taken in, a decade of information, lifetimes of information from experts, and it's brought us a long way. But the rest of the way, I think we must go together. And we all have a piece, and nobody's got the whole thing. So as we share, as we pool, we come to the great understanding of the great wisdom that has been available forever, and that we are first starting, because of mass communication, because of a program like this, we are first starting to really be able to talk to one another, really be able to get our smarts across to the whole world, to each other, with each other, because this is about each other. This isn't about experts and listeners. This is about us going home. Home is where the heart is. And let's all make a joyful, loving journey together. So Tell Me What You Know is going to be what the Cosmic Fuel Pump is going to be asking of everyone. And the people in particular that we're going to be asking it of initially on the show are the people that I live with in what I call my Garden of Eden. Ultimately, I'd love to have anybody come on the show and tell me what you know. And we'll be going out in the field and interviewing people all over and collecting what they know. And maybe we'll have inserts that we'll put on this show. So if you know anything, by all means, let me know. And we'll get to know one another. And then, perhaps you can come on the show with me. Also, by the way, if you'd like to have more than this smattering of what I know and what my friends know, you call me up or write to me, and I'll send you the diary that we've been keeping for many months now, where we've collected all, we've tried to report on our collection of the wisdom that we've had over these last few months. I'd be delighted to send it to you. You just ask me. I wanted to just give you a little example when I say tell me what you know. A little example of like what I know this week. I learn more all the time. I just know that that's what's going on this planet. We are learning this. This isn't something that, just sits there in a book. This is a process that we are discovering together. And so let me tell you what I discovered this week. I discovered this week that, let me see if I can say this right, that it's okay for others not to be okay. It's okay for me not to be okay. And once I really know that, guess what? Everything's okay. Now, I have learned this because I exist in family. I exist with this Garden of Eden, whereby I live with this group of people with whom I have this pact of trust, this pact of, well, what can I tell you? Trust is possibly the best word. So that all of a sudden, as one of them was spouting off this last week on something with which I totally disagreed, and I didn't even like his attitude, I was able, instead of going, wait a minute, which was my great temptation, a lifetime's temptation, I was able to, go into my computer and say, he's off on some weird trip, and he was very entrenched in it, as far as I could tell. And if I take issue, he'll just take issue back maybe. I don't know. That didn't seem like the most productive way. So I relaxed. And relaxed knowing that I love this being and that I trust this being and that if he's a little bit something today, we'll surely get to talk about that in the future or whatever. But I don't need to take issue. I don't need to be, the champion of the right, even though, of course, I'm the champion of the right. But I learned that it really was okay that he wasn't okay. And then I got that what was really important for him was in the thereafter to not do a number on himself. What did I do? Why did I do that? But to know that, wait a minute, I was a little off, so big deal. I have a quote from somebody that covers this issue, a guy named Dr. Robert Anthony, who has a wonderful little book of aphorisms. And he says, you don't have to be positive. You just have to be who you are. It's okay, just be real, just be who you are. Well, we'll talk more and more about this. In fact, the whole show today will talk more and more about this. I have with me today two of the wonderful people who live with me in our Garden of Eden. And I want to introduce one of them who's going to introduce the other one. And our show today is mostly about community and about family. And we have one of our members who's a real expert. So Alice is going to introduce him. But I want to read you something that Alice wrote to me by way of introduction to her. She says, my dear friend, Suze, I have searched the world for a spiritual companion. I've always fallen short of friends that have the potential to walk down my path. At last we found each other. Hooray! I love to cheer, TV shows, baseball games. But you and I know the big game to cheer about, life. Always present, never ending life. Skipping and choosing here. Can't we all see that it's the relationship between all beings? That's it. Well, Alice knows that. Alice, the great appreciator. And here she is.
Thanks, Suzanne. I really meant that about relationships. And I feel that the family that we have has got a real trusting relationship, which is what you want. And today, Greg's going to talk about relationships, which evolve into groups and families and communities. And on the way down to the studio today, we were listening to one of his radio station broadcasts that he had on a San Francisco station, and he really knows a lot about community. I was surprised. He's got some great credentials. This guy's an author. He wrote a book called Stress Management Training Curriculum for the American Red Cross, also Personal Health Management. He wrote his thesis on community at the University of Maryland in 1973. He's a researcher and member. He's got community all the way, in his aura. He also is a healer. Everyone has known him as a healer, too, on this show. He's really healing to the family. He's a healing presence. He's a wonderful being that just has a healing touch. You can feel it when he comes. So I think that's a great introduction for Greg. Here he is, our healer.
Thank you, Alice. Oh, you're so sweet.
It's a shame you two don't have last names, but that's okay. That's okay. Just Garden of Edenites. Edenites all.
Well, it's a pleasure for me to get to talk about one of my favorite subjects. I'm going to talk specifically about community, but then would like to shift it to family because there is a distinction between the two that I'd like to draw. But first, I'd like to say that my interest in community developed in stages, and that I had an opportunity to develop my knowledge in this in the area in two particular ways. One was doing my graduate thesis on it at the University of Maryland in the early 70s, and then 10 years later, I had the opportunity to do the research project that I really wanted to do then. I actually traveled visiting intentional communities along the West Coast for a summer. And the project was a funded project, a year-long project funded by the Turtle Island Foundation, who were a group living in a community themselves. They just happened to have quite a bit of money that they could fund something like this. And they wanted to find out what was going on in the communal movement in the 1980s. We all have images of what was going on in the 1960s. So here in the 1980s, I had a chance to travel and to really see and really become what I learned was the participant observer stance, where I actually became part of the group, part of the community for a very short time. I moved in and out of groups very quickly, but was able to capture quite a bit of information. And some of that I'd like to share today. But first, let me tell you where I first was bitten by the community bug. It was where a lot of people get bitten, believe it or not. It was in college. And it came through my close affinity with a group of friends that I found that I had a heart connection with, and also a very stimulating intellectual relationship with. And our goal was to get a house together and live together our senior year. Unfortunately, that did not materialize, but it gave me the glimpse that the spirit of community felt good. And I think that is what propelled me into a study of it later on. After college, I confronted what I think a lot of people probably confront, and that is suddenly you're out in the real world and it's not the same.
I remember that one.
Really, my journey took me to Washington, D.C., which was really the first city experience that I had had. I grew up in a small town of 3,000 people, went to a college of 1,200, and ended up in this huge city in which I only knew a handful of people. And spent that first year in Washington just trying to understand what a city is about, and also learning what isolation and alienation is about. When I was in graduate school, which was a year later, from 71 to 73, I had a chance to do literary research on the topic of early American communities. And anytime I begin talking with this, I feel a real deep affection, because the people in the 1600s, 1700s, and 1800s in this country were essentially doing what we are doing together. They confronted the same issues. They had many of the same ideals that we have. And I look at us as our latest group, or our latest attempt to create a more ideal approach to life.
The difference being, or the evolution of it being, as far as I can tell, that now, for perhaps the first time, because of mass communication, we really can have those models, like our model, not just be some isolated pocket that goes down in the history books, but we can actually share this information to the place where perhaps we can be the seeds. I get shivers sometimes, there's a shiver, that perhaps we and others like us can be the seeds of the new world that really is possible in our lifetime.
Suzanne, let's look at it together.
Really? Yay, family. You can get that one out too.
Well, let me comment on what you're saying, because it is one of the distinctions between the communities of the past and the communities of the present. Communities of the past believed that to be successful, they needed to isolate themselves from the rest of society. And many of them did that. And one of the reasons that communalism died out, or died down, toward the end of the 1800s was because this frontier shrunk. Mainstream culture kept on going further out west, and they fell under the influence of the outside forces. And in terms of the Industrial Revolution, it brought many gadgets and wizardry that lured people from their community hideouts and gave them a flavor of what 20th century life was to become. But today, the communities that I have been involved with in the Earth Community Network, which is a network of approximately 35 communities along the West Coast, each community wants to communicate with the outside world. They view themselves as stations of experimental stations. They're testing the ground so that when more people want to live that way, a more independent, self-sufficient lifestyle, then they will be able to pass their knowledge on to them. And they won't have to go through the difficult first couple of years that many of these groups went through. The truth is, everybody has to go through it anyway. But learning from other people's mistakes can really make a difference, tremendous difference. Well, let me talk a little about the communities of the past, because I have such affection for them, to go back and dip into my graduate thesis research. The first thing that I want to say is, and that many Americans don't really appreciate, they've forgotten, this country was built on the idealism of early communities. The Massachusetts Bay Colony of Puritans was really the first strong communal movement in this country, and they were followed by many other religious sects. Motivation for people coming and creating communities in this country were twofold, I think. One, they had to survive. They were a long way from the support system of Europe at the time, so they really had to hang together. The other factor, and probably the most significant, is they really didn't have a support system in Europe because they were escaping religious persecution. They came to this country hoping to create their version of heaven on earth. They believed they could do it. They believed that they knew all the ingredients that were necessary. So each of those groups had their opportunity to create something special for themselves. Unfortunately, those groups had a hard time tolerating other people's experiments. And the country eventually broke into many, many factions of what we call pluralism, and to the point where anything was okay. And that's one of the real gifts of our nation, is we have grown up with a kind of religious and social freedom that has been the envy of the rest of the world. Well, I talked about the Puritans in the 1600s. Well, each of the centuries seemed to bring a new wave of communal movements. In the 1700s and the 1800s, a whole series of communities developed. There were the Shakers, and there were the Quakers, there were the Hutterites, and there were the Mennonites, and there were the Owenites, and the Perfectionists. The Perfectionists are probably my favorite, and I'll tell you just a little about them. I don't want to ponder on any of these too long, but let me single out two of the communities, because one was in the 1700s and the other was the 1800s. In the 1780s, the Shaker community, led by their leader, Mother Ann, developed a very strong platform in which they were to grow to a size of 30,000 members. They had sites...
A little bigger than us.
a little bigger. They had sites all over the country. They were considered by John Humphrey Noyes, who was the spiritual leader of the Perfectionists, which I will talk about in just a moment, to be the greatest American community experiment. They were interesting to many people in that they were a celibate community. They were very much involved with ideas of spiritualism that many people are today. They knew energy, they could move energy. Mother Ann was a miraculous healer. I read accounts where she had touched someone's mouth and healed that person of cancer. She had great power in her hands, and obviously a great spiritual leader. Now, the Perfectionists, in contrast, were a community that developed in the 1840s and 50s, and their experiment lasted for 30 years. They were not a celibate community. In fact, they discouraged coupling. They were a group marriage of 250 people in upstate New York. They spent a lot of time in the courtroom trying to defend their right to live as they wanted. Accounts, however, of visitors who went to visit them came back to New York saying that they ate food that was as fine as any of the finest New York restaurants at the time. They talked about the people being extremely content and very open with each other. They encouraged each person's freedom to be with each other, and that if it was mutually all right on both parties, then there was sexual freedom for that group. Well, those are two communities to give you a contrast and flavor in this, in our history of communities. Just generally, there were two major trends in community at that time. One was a spiritual trend, and the other was a socialist trend. Both are very strong legacies of American history. John Humphrey Noyes, again, the leader of the Oneida community, the Perfectionists, believed that they were opposite sides of the same coin. The spiritualists believed that you could perfect society by perfecting the individual. And the socialists believed that you could perfect the individual by perfecting society. So you can see that they have a lot in common. I want to share one thing about my community research. I learned to look at process, and I went back and looked at how European society was set up, even before the settlers had come here. And I found that there were two very strong trends, and they're contradictory. For anyone to really understand community in America, they should know this. The one direction was toward personal freedom. And life in Europe was a very communal, very extended family-oriented society. And that when folks came to this country, it was very much that way. Through technology, we gained the freedom to move away from the family. First by the automobile, then by social mobility, moving out of the city, moving away from one's family. And the truth is, children grow up and they want to leave home. They have to leave home. The other trend, though, is toward belongingness, toward wanting to be part of something, being close with other people.
Which is something like you don't have in childhood. If you're not close to your real family, then maybe you want to go out there and live in a group situation where you can be close to another family.
Yes.
It must be the pull of the real world, the real world, in which we are one.
Right.
And the pull is always towards, having
Where
that
it feels
be
good.
the manifestation, because it does feel good,
Right.
Any separation between us is that place where we feel below the line, It's why it was wonderful for me to listen to my friend and just say, well, it's okay, because I didn't create any separation. I felt like we could still be one, even though whatever, I didn't know what he was doing, So what? We're really one.
Exactly.
I'd like to say something about our family experiment, and it kind of links us to the past in a certain kind of way. I've come to see that we are able to talk about playing the game of family, and we do it consciously, we do it intentionally. And by doing that, we make it all right to be ourselves. It's just as you were saying earlier in the show, by being yourself, you find out who each other really is.
Right.
Well, it's part of being human to really err, and make mistakes. And that is the human drama. We weren't put here to start out perfect. We were put here to perfect ourselves. I mean, what's the game? If there weren't a game, we would all be bored to death. So I got to really, this is my latest, I'm hot with this one. I got to see, it's okay to make mistakes. Others, myself, whatever. It's like tacking, you go a little bit this way, but then go a little bit this way. And, you really you're going this way all the time,
Right.
This way. We have a sign, Alice, that says this way.
Oh, wait a minute. This way.
Right. Well, Greg, am I going to throw out the rest of all my departments here on the show so that you can talk some more? I think one thing that we can do is you can come back on the next show. Do you have enough to come back and fill the next show?
Oh, he's got so much, Suzanne.
Sure.
Because I'm serious about that, because then I can go on and do the departments, or else we'll just let you, use up the show. What do you think?
Well, I have one thing to read on family that I think would kind of bring it all together.
All right. That sounds
so
good.
let me do that.
Do it.
It's from Guess Who?
Okay. This statement was written by a group of people that both Suzanne and I know, called the UV family. She has read from their newsletter before. This is on family. It says, to clarify our meaning for the word family, we could distinguish it from other forms of organization currently in vogue, the network, the hierarchy, and the intentional community. Family is more all-inclusive than a network. Networks usually arise around a task or a special interest, while a fundamental premise of networking is sharing skills, information, etc. It doesn't call into play the whole person. Members of a family get to swap functions, knowing that relatedness is not dependent on position or role, and that any organization is merely a temporary or hopefully effective game to play among equals. Family is more intimate than an intentional community. In a family, you can't be too familiar, can you? There is an acknowledged love, trust, commitment, and willingness to be honest. Familiarity, then, breeds not contempt, but deeper love. In this context, there is a natural desire to grow ever closer to others in your extended family. It's comfy, it's home, it's the loving context that both nurtures and empowers its members for greater service in the world. I just love it. I just love these people as well.
Oh,
Right.
really?
Yay,
Really?
family.
Excuse me, Suzanne.
Oh,
Yes.
hello. We're all ears, Max. I should have my ear.
Where's
today.
the ear?
No, my ear is elsewhere.
What do you got to say,
I'm
Max?
still
Yes.
in this little box,
Yes, honey.
and I have
What's cooking in there?
I have an observation to make. It's a social observation based upon what Greg just read, and that is for people to really understand what community is. In a world where alienation has become the norm rather than the exception, people are basically willing to do anything to be part of something. And therefore you have a proliferation of cults, where rather than becoming part of a community, you give up your power to one person.
That's what Zane was talking about.
And I think that it's
Last
something for individuals to understand and to listen, for example, to what Greg just read, that being part of a community means being an individual that's contributing to the whole. And I'm signing off for now because I know you have a few more things to talk about.
Bye, Max.
Right, actually
right
being part of a family such as, like for instance, we're doing, really is predicated on us having no leader and us all really being equals. And ultimately, here we all are on planet Earth and we all need to kind of do our share. Everybody's got to pull together. So
I've learned to call a setup like we have as a leaderful community,
a leaderful, that's wonderful.
not a leaderless community.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well,
High octanes or
yes, a
messages from
high
Central?
octane. We're going to have a
Oh,
high
good.
octane hit of the week this week. My messages from Central I'm going to save till next week. I have wonderful messages from Central from the Law of One. And but we'll talk about that next week. This week, we have a high octane hit of the week on the old cosmic fuel pump. Something arrived in the mail. I don't know, we saw a little notice and we sent for it. A bonanza. Always what you hope will come in the mail and rarely does. This is a little publication called The Seeds of Unfolding. And if you get in touch with me, I'll tell you how to get it. You can get a free copy. And then you can subscribe if you want to. And I don't know too much about them. I'm trying to pick up from this little literature. Who are they? They sound wonderful. Let me read you a little bit. They have a lecture series going, and here's what some of the introduction says about their lecture series. The activities of CAF Foundation, which is who they are, offer points of support in the quest to discover who we really are and our possibilities for transforming ourselves and society. Society is the external projection of the state of consciousness of all of us who compose it. Only by transforming our possessive, selfish, accumulative state of consciousness into an expansive, universal, and participating consciousness can we transform ourselves and the world around us. The main purpose of CAF Foundation is to help individuals walk on a road of love and offering of themselves. This road is no panacea to the problems of the world. It is an internal and external road of transformation and participation. There is no new road. What is new is to be the road. You get it?
Sounds good to me, Susan.
Oh, I know some of you really know what I'm talking about. You call me up now, don't forget. I have lots of good things to read from this, and I am running out of time, so I'm going to read from this next week also, from their little publication. In the meantime, I think we only have time to leave you with a few thoughts. Send for the diary. I just, let me know. It's my nickel. Be delighted to send it to you. Tell me what you know. Don't forget, we got a spot open for you here on the show. Love to have you here if you know anything about staying on the high side. And it's time to open my restaurant here. We're, oh yes, indeed.
They're knocking at the door.
Knocking at the door, just dying for this gourmet gossip. So, I can't stand the clamor. Come in, it's time already. Wait. Well, we'll see you all next week. Hope you've had a good time. I have. And I love my dear friends. Thank you for being here with me.
Suzanne, you're great.
Bye.
Bye, Max.
Bye, Max. Call to find out when the Cosmic Fuel Pump will be on next week, and call or write if you want me to send you a copy of my written notes.